Hi, everybody. Welcome to a Fuel Radio conversation, or really just a conversation. I've had an interest in health for a long time. Have a kinesiology degree, and gut health is one of the things that has come up. And I heard about Sue through Leap Zone and through Jim Gardner. I asked Jim for a client testimonial, and he talked about Sue. So, thank you for joining me today, Sue.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
And just before we got on, we were having some fun with Sue's last name, and she's a good sport. Here we go, Sue. Sue Potgieter.
Oh, very good.
Pretty
Very
good.
good.
Okay,
Yes,
let's hear you
yes.
pronounce it.
Supportkita. It's the in the back of the throat, you
The
know.
yes.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm brave enough to do the.
Well, at least you got further than just pot.
Yeah. So, there's different things that come and go as sort of the rage, but I think this is, who knows what we're on to now in terms of health. But Jim told me that you have some good stories about and some people that you've really helped. So that's awesome, and I want to hear about that in a sec. But before we get to that, maybe we could just hear a little bit about your story. Like, why did you become a nutritionist in the first place?
Okay, well, it goes back really to when I trained as a teacher in the 1970s. And I actually trained as a home economics teacher, or food and nutrition, as you might know it as. So even in the 70s, I was teaching high school students to learn how to cook, but also teaching them the difference between proteins and carbohydrates and healthy fats, etc.
Right.
So when they left school, they did have that basic knowledge of the things that they should eat and steer clear of. And I've had a lot of businesses in my life. I've had a wedding cake business. I've had a fruit and vegetable delivery business in Johannesburg. And back in 2010, I was feeling particularly rubbish.
Hmm.
I'd had to have a hysterectomy, gone through a very fast menopause, shall I say.
Mm.
And I was eating a typical Western diet. So lots of carbs, processed foods, love chocolate. And I wasn't sleeping well, and I'd put on loads of weight. I was, the typical menopause symptoms, hot flushes, night sweats, didn't have much energy, felt really lethargic, and I just thought I have to do something. I wasn't taking any medication as such, or didn't need to be on any, but I just didn't feel well and I couldn't put my finger on it. So I made the decision, and I wouldn't recommend this for anybody, but I made the decision overnight to go raw vegan. So I cut out meat, wheat, dairy, coffee, sugar, and tea. I was drinking about 7 cups of British tea, English tea,
Wow.
every day.
Yeah.
And I also taken quite a lot of over-the-counter painkillers for headaches, backache, that sort of thing. Oh my word, Rod! I went into 3 days. All I could say it was withdrawal.
A withdrawal, for sure.
It
For
was
sure.
withdrawal. I had
Yeah.
a headache like you can't believe, and I decided. So I rode that wave of the 3 days. And then sorry, my screen's just sort of decided to halve itself. That's better. I decided, now that I felt able to think straight, I then went into eating masses and masses of raw fruit and veg, nuts and seeds, good olive oil. And within 3 months, all my symptoms had cleared up. I'd lost 14 kilos in weight. Which is about over 30 pounds in weight, sleeping like a baby, felt amazing. I had energy for days and days and days. And so I thought mistakenly, oh, look, everybody needs to go raw vegan because this is obviously the way to go. Then I discovered that actually it doesn't suit everybody because
Sure.
of their digestive problems or digestive issues. So a raw diet isn't good for somebody with digestive issues. So I then retrained again. And I was a vocal coach in between all that. So I retrained again, and as a nutritional therapist and a naturopath, and realized that in order to recommend what's right for that individual, that I needed to treat them as an individual with a unique history and a unique digestive system.
Yeah.
Because that's where our health really stems from, is from our gut.
Right. That's a great point. So you discovered that, like, sort of one diet, and just, I'm using diet in the broadest sense of the term,
Yes.
doesn't suit all.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. And what works for one person doesn't work for another. Same with supplements.
Sure.
Somebody will say, "Oh, I've been taking this,"
right?
But it's maybe not right for somebody else. So it's very much personalized nutrition these days.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that your training helped you to personalize it a little bit, rather than just saying, "Hey, this worked for me and this is going to work for everybody else." Now you discovered maybe how things needed to be personalized and changed up for every individual.
Exactly, because now I like to call myself the health detective. And so
I like that. That's great.
So a client sitting in front of me is a crime scene, and just like an ordinary detective will look for clues, so I look for clues in the client in front of me, and those clues will be found maybe in what they're eating, or in emotional trauma, which of course it does affect our health.
Wow.
It may be in the family history. It may be in something that went on in their childhood. And so I look at the stories that have gone before, and then I look at the triggers as to what's driving the problem now. And by looking for those clues, I can then begin to unpick the problem that I'm faced with.
This is kind of one of my own soapboxes, but just say a little bit more about trauma. How does that affect people? And I guess you're doing some sort of intake, and you're discovering what sort of some of the things that people have gone through. But like a lot of people, are you talking about emotional eating?
That all comes into it, but also trauma during childhood.
Yeah.
So even things like moving house often as a child, and we don't get time to process those losses, because it is a loss. It's a loss of security for a young child. If there are research is now showing that there are things called ACEs, so adverse childhood events, that really can impact somebody's health 20, 30, 40 years later. And my job is to go back, to dig deep and ask the right questions and find out, what did happen. So trauma, we need to process it correctly, because it is held in our tissues, and it can drive some of the problems that we have nowadays, that we then can't really understand what's going on. I was held up at gunpoint back in 2005 in an armed robbery.
Wow.
And had post-traumatic counselling after that to help me process it. Now, I haven't actually thought about was the way I felt in 2010 as a result of what happened in 2005. I haven't actually thought about that. Maybe I ought to take my own advice. But it's an area of emotional healing that we have to look at, because we are, as a naturopath, I look at clients as a whole person.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I want to ask you about some client stories. We're going to get into the science of what you do in a little bit here. I'd love to have a bit of a science lesson.
Okay.
But maybe before we do that, maybe you could just tell us about one or two people that you've helped.
Okay. Well, I never know who's going to come through my door when they come. I do send out a needs assessment beforehand, so I've got some idea, but it's really in the questioning that I discover what's really going on. There's one lady that comes to mind, and she came to me in really a very depressed state. She had no hope. She couldn't see an end to her problem. She had trailed round doctors, consultants for 10 years. And she was suffering from extreme diarrhea every day.
Wow.
5 or 6 times a day. As a result, she felt ashamed. She wasn't able to leave the house. She'd lost her job. They couldn't go away on holiday as a family. And it had really impacted her life. And she said to me, "Sue, you're my last resort. And I really don't know if you can help me."
No pressure.
No pressure. But I always say to clients, I do love a challenge. I love to get my mum was a police officer, so maybe I picked it up from there. But I do love a challenge.
That's where the detective side of you comes
That's where the detective side comes in, yes. Yeah. So she came to me with the results of a comprehensive stool test. And I looked through the results very carefully. And to all intents and purposes, she'd taken antibiotics all her life. It looked like she'd been on courses and courses of antibiotics, which strip your gut microbiome.
Sure.
So on questioning her, she said, "No, I've never taken antibiotics." And I was like, what's going on here? So I dug deeper. And hidden in the sort of small print, if you like, she was completely lacking one particular substance that's produced in your large intestine, and that which controls fluid. She didn't have any of it. It was lacking. And so what was happening was that the large intestine was holding on to too much fluid, which was giving her this explosive diarrhea. So I put her on one supplement. I said, "We're going to do one thing." She said, "What, only one?" I said, "Yes, because we need to know whether this is going to work." So I put her on this one supplement, and she took it for 3 weeks. And I said, "We may not see a change overnight. People have taken years to get to where they are today with their health."
Sure. Especially if she's missing a particular nutrient. Or
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the supplement I gave her replaced this particular substance in her colon.
Was it like an enzyme or something?
Yes, it was. Yes, okay. N-butyrate.
Okay.
And 3 weeks after I put her on it, I got an email from her to say, "Sue, I have been to the toilet normally 3 days running."
Wow.
Which was life-changing for her.
Yeah, I can imagine when you described what she was going through.
And she'd had it for she'd had it for 10 years.
Wow.
And she took that for a little while, and then she was able to stop, and she's back at work now. They've been on holiday, and once we'd got that organized, then I could then start to work on her diet, because she felt so depressed. She was just eating lots and lots of processed carbs, cake and biscuits and chocolate and donuts. And those are empty nutrients anyway. So I was then able to put her onto a better diet, and consequently her depression cleared up, and her mental angst about everything cleared up. So that's really one of my greatest success stories.
One of your favorites, huh?
It is one of my favorites because it affected the whole family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So I'm wondering about, I watched a video on the weekend of a guy who had high cholesterol, and again was eating vegan, and went to his doctor, and his doctor wanted to put him on medication for his high cholesterol, and he did what you did. He went, he started a raw vegan diet and turned things around, and stopped eating sugars, processed foods, and cream. So, what would you? I'm sure you've had people that come to you before with high cholesterol. What would you recommend for someone that like what would the process be for someone who has high cholesterol in working with you?
Yes. So interestingly enough, I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine this morning about clients with high cholesterol, and a very good, I could say diet, it's what it's called, but there's a very good protocol called the Portfolio Diet, which particularly addresses high cholesterol.
Okay.
It's based on the Mediterranean diet, which is an anti-inflammatory diet. Mm-hmm. And in the past, we've thought that it was fat that drove cholesterol up. But what we understand now is that it's sugar and what we call trans fats. And trans fats are your processed fats like corn oil and vegetable oils. And they're the culprits, if you like, that drive up your cholesterol. Mm-hmm. So by going on a Mediterranean diet, by reducing the omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory, and increasing your omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory, which are found in oily fish, nuts and seeds, your olive oil, then you begin to redress the balance, because inflammation that begins in the gut creates inflammation in the rest of the body. And it can present as skin conditions. It can present as depression, joint pains like arthritis. It can present as cardio issues, obviously weight issues. So it's inflammation, particularly starting in the gut, that drives all this. So I'd recommend that people look at the Portfolio Diet. Okay. It particularly recommends something called plant sterols, which are very, very effective at bringing down particularly LDL and your total cholesterol.
Okay. As I'm getting older, my friends are getting older.
Funny that.
Arthritis is appearing a lot more too. Is that something that has to do with gut health as well? Or?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Anything with an itis on the end means inflammation of. Okay. So it's inflammation of the joints particularly. And if you reduce your inflammation in the gut, then you reduce your omega-6, omega-3 balance, then you will see that the joint pains, the stiffness begin to reduce.
Excellent. Well, go ahead and keep going. Maybe give us a bit of a science lesson. What's going on in our gut that's making us unhealthy?
Well, the gut microbiome, has been a big news feature over the last few years, particularly the fact that we have 4 pounds of these little critters in our gut. And we used to think that we were in control of them.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, isn't it? It is a lot.
Yeah. I think because I've been hearing them as being like micro type of things, right? I was thinking.
Yes. So they're made up of bacteria and fungi and viruses and parasites. And it's a bit like having a garden. If you had a garden with just one plant in, it would be very boring and it wouldn't be a very healthy garden. Whereas if you have a garden and you plant it with different shrubs and different flowers, maybe slot in some vegetables in between in your borders, and you've got grass, then you've got a real variety. So you get lots of different wildlife and insects. And it's really the same in your gut, that everything you eat, Rod, changes the bacteria in your gut. And you have a balance. You need a good balance of what we call good bacteria. And then we have pathogenic or bad bacteria. If you have an imbalance and you end up with an overgrowth of bad bacteria, then that can cause a number of things, from bloating to abdominal cramps to stomach pain to either constipation or diarrhea, all sorts of things that can go on, and things like hot flushes if we then introduce estrogen into the balance, because your bad bacteria prevent the detoxification of estrogen for women and men.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important to keep a good balance of your bacteria. You've got to you need some of the, what we would term bad bacteria, but you do need a higher amount of the good. And the way that you make sure that you have that is by eating plenty of rainbow fruit and vegetables.
Okay.
So try and eat one portion of a different colored group of fruit and veg every day. Mm-hmm. When you serve your meal, have a plate, divide it in half. Half should be your vegetables. Above ground vegetables are best. Mm-hmm. Quarter would be your protein foods, so your meat, your fish, eggs, cheese. And a quarter would be any grains that you might have and healthy fats. So by eating, so for example, for a man, you, Rod, should be consuming 8 to 10 portions of fruit and vegetables per day. Mm-hmm. And a portion is the size of your fist. So for a man, obviously your fist is larger than mine, so your portion sizes would be larger. Mm-hmm. And that would be no more than 2 portions of low sugar berries. So the thing about inflammation in the gut is that it tends to be driven by sugar and processed foods. And we really need to try and reduce the amount of sugar and processed foods that we eat. Because the thing is that sugar, both sets of bacteria feed. They feed and they poo. Am I allowed to say that? They eat and they poo. So your good bacteria love their veggies. The bad bacteria love their sugar. I mean, that's very basic, very basic. But it's true. So often somebody who does eat a lot of sugary foods will find that they are craving those sugary foods. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it can be because those pathogenic bacteria are shouting at you, feed me, feed me. Mm-hmm. So the gut microbiome, we also know that it's our controller. So it speaks, that bacteria speak to what's going on in our brain, for example. So we know that gut inflammation affects particularly the elderly. It can encourage the increase of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. It's all linked back down into the gut. So it's vital that we do. That's why I start there. I look at what's going on in the gut.
Right.
But nowadays, the most recent, so moving on from that, the next layer, if you like, that they've come up with is the oral microbiome. So what's going on in our mouths? Mm. So, for example, if you clean your teeth and you get any blood when you spit out, then you have inflammation, gum inflammation, and that's linked to your gut, right. And that will be driving symptoms in your body. So we really need to take care of our oral health now, and not just our gut health.
Yeah, something I just read about recently is that poor oral health can lead to inflammation of the heart. Like,
yes.
It's not a gut issue, but
yes,
that was surprising to me. I've been brushing and flossing my teeth more since
excellent, excellent.
That article. It's important, hey? So what are some of the, I have 2 questions. I'll ask this one first. Like, what are some of the major symptoms of poor gut health? It sounds like gut health just affects everything, but maybe just if you could share with us, what are some of the major signs of poor gut health?
Well, some of the obvious ones, as I mentioned before, are bloating. So a lot of people will say, that they'll eat a meal and then they'll feel really bloated. Some women in particular may say, gosh, I look 6 months pregnant because of the bloating, stomach cramps, or just abdominal pain and constipation. Now, long-term constipation is a risk factor for Parkinson's disease. So people who've had constipation since they were a child and something they've struggled with, that's one of the major risk factors. So we have to look at addressing that. Similarly, obviously, diarrhea. But then because 70 to 80% of your immune system is housed in your digestive tract, we can end up with autoimmune diseases if you have gut issues. So things like lupus, fibromyalgia, then skin conditions like eczema, psoriasis, lung issues like asthma, mental mood disorders. They're all linked into what's going on in your gut. So if I was to give you a list of different symptoms, I could produce a book for you. But really, it's there will be some link between whatever is going on in people to what's going on in the gut. Sometimes I do all the questioning and I can't find anything. Their gut is working perfectly. So then I have to start digging again and look for something else.
So as a gut detective, what are some of the tests that you do? Do you have people do blood tests and that sort of thing? What are
Yes, I can. Yeah. I'm trained in the functional medicine model, and so I use functional testing to see what's going on. Often I'll use those as to substantiate what I already think. Particularly if we've gone through maybe 3 to 4 weeks and we're not seeing the improvements that I'd expect, then I'll use testing just to confirm what I'm suspicious of. But there are comprehensive stool tests, which are a bit gross, but they really do show us such a lot of what's going on down in the gut, whether you're processing fats properly, so whether your liver's working correctly, your gallbladder, you've got a lovely variety of species of bacteria, whether you've got all the correct substances like the N-butyrate. There's so much that we can tell from functional testing.
Cool. I know here locally, the health labs were closed down and now they're open again. And I went for a blood test because I hadn't been for a physical or whatever in quite a while. And my doctor recommended that I get a blood test, but they weren't doing stool tests yet. It sounds like they may start doing them next week. And it was the Life Lab here was closed down because of COVID-19, but they're open now. And
yes,
but, they're not doing stool testing quite yet.
No, they're not doing stool testing. Well, we've all had to adapt, haven't we, in this time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So obviously, I've been seeing clients online.
Okay. Yeah.
Rather than in person, and that's worked very well.
Yeah.
But yes. One of the exciting things that I'm looking forward to is there are some companies now that are moving towards test-based supplements.
Okay.
Because as practitioners, we recommend supplements for various reasons, not long-term because they're really for short-term use only. But it's how they're doing is basically dependent on what our client says. Well, I feel better, which is very subjective. Yeah. Whereas if we could test before and then after they've taken it to see what the actual effect in the body is, then that's really exciting developments going on.
Interesting.
Yes, it is. It is.
So you mentioned something there that I'm curious about is just, you said supplements are only for the short term. I mean, I've been taking a multivitamin consistently for years. Okay, so
I do believe that because of the depleted soil that we currently have in the world due to over farming, that a lot of the minerals that our parents and grandparents got from their vegetables, etc., is far less than what we get now. So I would recommend a multivitamin for everybody. Okay. But it is good to swap it over. Our bodies get used to things.
Sure.
So switch it up now and then.
It's just like exercise. They recommend you do different things, right?
Exactly.
Because your body gets used to doing a certain exercise. Yeah.
Yes. And the thing about supplements, so some clients I've had come to me, and they'll bring a bag of lotions and potions and bottles and pills. and say, well, I take this and I take this. And sometimes they'll be like a row of 15.
Yeah.
Because they decided they'd take this one. Then this friend recommended this one. And then
Sure.
they saw this one on advertised
internet.
on the TV, on the internet. Good old Mr. Google.
Yeah.
Or they read a health magazine and then they were recommended. And the thing about supplements is that they may interact with one another.
Mm-hmm.
They may interact with some of the medication that people are on.
Yeah.
And if you take certain supplements at the same time, they may well counteract. So it's like you're wasting your money.
Yeah.
So I look very carefully at what supplements people are taking. And sometimes I'll say, right, we're going to cut all of these out, and then we're going to start again. And that's quite a mindset shift for some people.
They've become quite dependent on those
absolutely,
at least
absolutely.
mentally, right, or psychologically.
Yes, because we should be able to get what we need if we're eating a good whole food diet with good fats and low sugar and not too many processed carbs. We should be able to get what we need nutrient-wise from our diet. I only use supplements as short-term therapeutics to get a client to where they should be.
Okay, interesting. That's cool. It's good to know. What are some things, like just speaking to our general audience, what are some of your top tips for better gut health?
Well, really, better gut health is based on what you eat. So for people who suffer from blood sugar issues, so that feeling of after dinner where you think, oh, I could just go to sleep, or you feel sluggish, that's because your blood sugar's dipped. So I would recommend that you have a portion of protein, a protein food at every meal. So your protein is your meat, your fish, poultry, cheese, obviously tofu, or any of the lentils and pulses that are also proteins. Then you should make sure that you are getting your 8 to 10 portions of rainbow vegetables for a man and 7 to 9 for a woman each day. If you're not eating those right now, then don't go from 1 to 10 because you won't maintain it. Add in 1 a week, or add in a new one every few days.
Sure,
The way I like to deal with clients is to add in healthy rather than just saying, okay, we're going to take all this rubbish out, because then everybody goes into nosedive and panics, and then we feel we're being denied what we want. So that's why we fall off the wagon. So protein, veggies, and healthy fats. So that's your olive oil, coconut oil, oily fish, avocados, nuts and seeds. Make sure you drink plenty of water.
Right.
Cheers. That you get good quality sleep. You make sure you move every day, and that you use some kind of relaxation or some kind of stress relief, because stress impacts the gut terribly. And interestingly enough, if you have high stress and you don't sleep well, those two, that combination really impacts the gut, and then drives sugar cravings and carbohydrate cravings. So if you don't sleep well, the next day you are going to crave carbohydrates purely because your body needs extra energy.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that would be protein at every meal, your rainbow fruit and veg, your healthy fats, good sleep, exercise, water, and some kind of relaxation technique. Can be yoga, or using an app that helps you, listening to music, or just getting out into nature.
Yeah.
It's actually really very simple, Rod. If you strip it back to basics, it's just taking it back to what we really know is simple and easy and natural.
Yeah. It in some ways, it's a bit of common sense, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It is. We
Yeah.
all get way too complicated about things, and there's so many different diets that come and go. You know, one time it's the grapefruit diet, then it's this diet,
Yeah.
and I speak from experience, being a yo-yo dieter all my life. You know, I've tried them all, and they're successful, but because they haven't trained me to change my eating habits or changed my lifestyle,
Right.
when I get to where I've got to and I come off the diet, the weight piles on again and more besides.
Yeah.
So it's all about teaching people how to change their dietary habits over a period of time.
Yeah, habits is a big one, isn't it?
It is a big one, yes.
Creating healthy habits. And I like what you say about adding sort of one thing at one time, not to overwhelm yourself, because it's often what we don't do. We do the exact opposite.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, like
Yes.
after the holidays is typically when you see that the most. People get kind of disgusted with themselves and go, you know, sort of way overboard. It's too
Absolutely.
much,
We
too
just
much
swing
too soon,
from
right?
one way to the other, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes. They say that the average person, I don't know about the States or Canada, but here in the UK, I read some research the other day to say that the average person has put on plus minus 15 pounds during lockdown. So I don't know what you call it in Canada. It's lockdown here. Is it quarantine for you guys?
Or lockdown or
Lockdown.
self-isolation. Yeah, there's a bunch of different
Self-isolation.
terms for it. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's actually a fascinating phenomenon that I've seen is that a lot of people used COVID-19 and I'm not saying this judgmentally at all. This is just an observation. Is a lot of people sort of just I see a lot of posts about people just, you know, they're just going to indulge themselves. and
Yes.
healthy eating has kind of gone out the window for some people. Yeah.
I think so. I think you've got the two camps. You've got those who've taken the opportunity to get super fit or to super healthy.
Yeah.
And then you've got the rest who they're working from home. So it's easy to go down to the kitchen and grab a snack of this and a bowl of that. And even if it's healthy snacks like hummus and raw veggies, you know, it's still food. Right. So you're not giving your system time to recover. Yeah. So I've put together a course called Lose Your Lockdown Love Handles.
Oh, nice. Great. I'm glad you mentioned that. How do people find, we're not going to wrap up quite yet. I have another question for you, but how do people find out about that?
So that's going to be launching middle of July.
Okay.
And if people go to my website, my page on my website, because the website's being revamped at the moment. But if they want to put their details in, then I can send them, I can give them a quick call and we can discuss it further.
Excellent. I mean, I've spoken with lots of people who are in that position that could use your help. So.
Oh, well, hello. Why do you think I put the course together? Because I've done it myself as well.
Yeah, hopefully people will check that out. A question that's coming to mind, and my friend asked this on his marketing podcast, and I want to ask you, but what's some of the bad advice you hear in your industry?
Bad advice.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's a good question. Let me think about that.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, so go ahead and take a minute.
I think if you do anything to excess, Rod, is bad advice.
Sure.
Eating cabbage soup for 3 days, is taking things to extreme.
Sure.
Now, there are benefits to being in a fasted state. I'm not saying that there isn't, but if you're going to fast, then you do need to do it with the help of a practitioner, for example. Bad advice is, add in another 3 supplements to your already bulging kitchen cupboard.
Maybe bad advice is listening to too much advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think so. So.
Yeah.
It's like now, we've all been at home And I don't know about you, but I actually had to turn the news off, and I had to turn social media off for a while because I was completely overwhelmed
Absolutely.
by the noise. And I
Yeah.
think that's when clients come to see me, they are overwhelmed because
And confused, right?
they're
Overwhelmed and
confused. There is
yeah.
so much confusing advice out there. You know, 1 minute we're allowed to eat eggs, then we're not allowed to eat eggs, then we're allowed to eat eggs again, then we're not allowed to eat butter, now we can eat butter.
Right.
So it's very, very difficult to navigate the noise that's out there.
It sounds like you help people cut through the noise.
Well, I try.
Yeah.
I do try. And
well, just by going through your process, I can see how you know, by eliminating things and asking questions, you're trying to get to what is their personal issue.
Yes.
And
yes.
and how they can help themselves and how you can help them. Yeah.
Yes, because I can have two people come to me with the same condition, but the way that we improve that is completely different for both of them. There will be similar things, but it is completely individual.
Fasting is another fad right now. You just mentioned it.
Yes, yes.
Do you incorporate fasting into what you do, or how do you help?
Yes, I do. Intermittent fasting. So for those who don't understand what that is, it's basically giving your system a really good window of rest. So, for example, you would have your evening meal at 6:30 in the evening or 7. Yeah. And then you would not eat again until maybe 11 or 12 the next day, or even 1 o'clock.
Right.
So that your system really, really has that time to rest. And so in that time, some of the processes in the body reset themselves. It's very good for people who have what's called insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity, which has come about from just overburdening the body with sugar.
Nice.
And it's not something you have to do every day.
Right.
Try it. Or go from, because a lot of people tend to snack in the evening. They'll have their evening meal, then they'll put the TV on and they'll have a bowl of popcorn or a bowl of crisps. And they'll eat what I call mindlessly. You know, we talk about mindfulness. This is mindless eating.
Yeah, exactly.
A glass of wine maybe, or a gin and tonic and a bowl of something. Yeah. And we do it. We're not aware of the fact that we've eaten a whole bowl of popcorn or a big bar of chocolate. And so if we can cut that out, then we're really doing ourselves a big favor.
I think one of the confusing things about fasting, and someone just mentioned this to me recently, was about the advice that everybody should have breakfast, that breakfast is so important. So how do you address that?
Well, you know, there's the saying, eat breakfast as like a king, lunch like a lord, and supper like a pauper. Right. And you know, there's wisdom in that as well. Sure, yes, there is. Yeah. Some people really don't feel well when they eat breakfast. Some people can't cope with a cooked breakfast. So, for example, scrambled eggs on sourdough toast or rye toast, or even on sweet potato toast. That's with a handful of spinach or a handful of arugula. That would be a very nice cooked breakfast. But some people, they cannot face that when they get up in the morning. So they could have a smoothie with berries and nuts, and maybe some avocado in, plant milk or coconut milk or whatever. But on other days, do the internet fasting. But it's a case of trial and error for all of us. Sure. You know, if you don't feel well on it, then I would say that it's maybe not the best for you.
Yeah. We've done that, by the way. Recently, we've done some we've done avocado toast, but we've also done sweet potato toast just as a slice. And I think we did yam as well. We're doing more homemade yam fries and that sort of thing. And
lovely.
They taste great. Yeah.
Well, a lot of people are very dependent on bread. It's a very staple part of their diet, and so by switching that out for sweet potato toast, which of course you can do in the toaster.
Yeah.
Is great. My clients love it. I go, yes, how about poached eggs on sweet potato toast? And they go, really?
Cauliflower is another good substitute for bread as well. So, you know, we've made cauliflower pizzas and
Yes. Rod, I've lost you.